Imagine waking up every morning chasing tiny bursts of pleasure, that first scroll on your phone, that sweet bite of sugar, that quick hit of validation online. We live in a world that has turned pleasure into a product, cheap, endless, and dangerously available. But here's the truth. The more we chase pleasure, the less of it we actually feel. This is not just philosophy, it's neuroscience. Inside your brain, every moment of pleasure releases dopamine, the molecule of desire. It's not happiness itself, it's the promise of happiness. And in our modern world, dopamine is everywhere. In likes, notifications, food delivery, binge watching, scrolling. Every time you give in, you reinforce the loop: craving, consuming, crashing. Over time, your brain adjusts and you need more just to feel normal. This is the biology of modern addiction, but there's a way out. Not by rejecting pleasure, but by rebalancing it. The secret is learning to live in harmony with pain and pleasure. Because every moment of pain, every challenge, every delay, every act of self-restraint triggers the opposite side of the balance, a natural rise in dopamine that brings deeper, longer-lasting satisfaction. True joy doesn't come from constant indulgence, it comes from earned pleasure. When you put away your phone, when you fast from your favorite dopamine source, your brain starts to heal. It rebuilds sensitivity. You begin to feel small things again. Sunlight on your skin, a quiet conversation, a simple meal. These moments hit differently when your brain is no longer numb. So ask yourself, what do you reach for when you're bored, sad, or alone? What's your drug of choice? Because it's not just substances, it's screens, sugar, status. And every time you say no to the quick hit, you're saying yes to a stronger mind, a clearer life, a more powerful version of yourself. This is the science that will change how you use pleasure forever. Not by taking it away, but by teaching you to earn it, to respect it, and to let your brain find balance again. Because the greatest pleasure you can experience isn't in the next hit. It's in freedom from needing one. Pleasure is not happiness. It's the hook that keeps us coming back for more. We often confuse the two because they feel so similar in the moment. That burst of excitement when you check your phone, the taste of your favorite dessert, the thrill of buying something new, it feels good, but it doesn't last. What you're really experiencing is dopamine, the brain's chemical of desire and motivation, not contentment. It's the spark that says, you do that again. It's powerful, it's intoxicating, and it's designed to push you toward rewards that once helped our ancestors survive. Food, connection, success. But in today's world, dopamine is everywhere and it's been weaponized. Every app, every ad, every notification is engineered to keep you chasing that next little surge of pleasure. Think about it. The moment you open your phone, you enter a world of infinite stimulation. One swipe, one click, one scroll, and your brain lights up like a slot machine. It's not your fault, you're wired for it, but what begins as pleasure quickly turns into compulsion. Dopamine makes us chase, but it never lets us rest. It whispers to just one more video, one more message, one more tasty. And when the feeling fades, it leaves behind emptiness, boredom, even anxiety, the craving for another hit. That's why pleasure alone never satisfies. The more you feed it, the hungrier it gets. Your brain starts to adapt. It turns down its sensitivity, building tolerance. What used to make you feel good no longer hits the same. That one cookie becomes 3. One episode becomes a whole season. One scroll turns into hours lost. You're not lazy. Your brain is simply trying to find balance in a world that constantly overstimulates it. Dopamine drives you to seek pleasure, but it never lets you stop seeking. And this endless chase doesn't bring happiness, it brings exhaustion. Happiness, on the other hand, isn't a chemical spike. It's a state of balance. It's calm, grounded, and lasting. But in the dopamine-driven world, happiness feels boring compared to the rush of pleasure. That's why we keep reaching for more. The phone, the drink, the distraction, anything that will bring the next hit. Yet the truth is, the more we chase pleasure, the further we drift from happiness. Because happiness doesn't come from stimulation, it comes from meaning, purpose, and effort. When you start to understand this difference, when you see that pleasure is not happiness, everything changes. You stop being a passenger in your own brain and start taking the wheel. You realize that the quick highs don't give you peace, they steal it. The thrill fades fast, but the emptiness lingers. And so the cycle begins again, craving, consuming, crashing. The trap is invisible, but it's everywhere. The real breakthrough comes when you start to resist the hook, when you pause before reacting, when you let the craving pass instead of feeding it. Each time you do, your brain begins to heal, the dopamine balance starts to restore itself. You begin to feel satisfaction in smaller, more natural things again, the warmth of sunlight, the sound of laughter, the stillness of silence. That's the quiet kind of happiness that pleasure can never deliver. Pleasure is meant to be a signal, not a lifestyle. It's supposed to guide you toward what sustains life, not dominate it. When you use pleasure wisely, as a reward, not a routine, it enhances your happiness instead of destroying it. But when you chase it blindly, it becomes the hook that drains your energy, your focus, and your joy. So, the next time you reach for your phone or that extra bite or that extra episode, ask yourself, is this happiness or just another hit of dopamine? Because the difference between the two isn't just psychological, it's the difference between being in control of your life or being controlled by it. The modern world is a dopamine trap. Everywhere you look, something is calling for your attention. Flashing screens, endless feeds, quick entertainment, fast food, constant noise. Each one is designed to give you a small hit of pleasure, a quick rush of dopamine, a momentary sense of satisfaction that fades almost as fast as it arrives. What most people don't realize is that this isn't accidental. The world we live in has been engineered to keep you craving more, not fulfilled, not content, but endlessly reaching for the next hit. Think about how your day begins. The first thing you do when you wake up is reach for your phone. Before you've even said a word, your brain is already flooded with microbursts of dopamine from notifications, messages, and updates. Your attention gets hijacked before you've even had the chance to decide how you want to feel. And that's the trap. Once you're hooked, you stay hooked. Every scroll, every like, every sound is a cue that triggers another tiny dose of dopamine, teaching your brain that pleasure is always one tap away. But here's the catch. Dopamine doesn't bring you satisfaction. It keeps you searching for it. That's why no matter how much you consume, videos, food, validation, it's never enough. The system that once helped humans survive by motivating us to hunt, explore, and achieve has now been hijacked by modern life. Instead of using dopamine to find meaning, we're burning it chasing stimulation. And every time we indulge, the baseline of what feels normal rises a little higher. Soon, ordinary life, quiet moments, stillness, real connection, feels flat, dull, almost painful. This is why the modern dopamine trap is so dangerous. It doesn't just steal your attention, it rewires your brain. It teaches you to avoid boredom at all costs. It convinces you that silence means something is wrong. It rewards impulsivity and punishes patience. And little by little, your ability to focus, to wait, to simply be begins to disappear. You start craving constant movement, constant input, constant pleasure, but the more you feed it, the more restless you become. Corporations understand this perfectly. Every design choice, every color, sound, and notification is optimized to keep you hooked. The apps you use most aren't built to serve you, they're built to use you. They manipulate your brain's reward system the same way addictive drugs do. The goal isn't to make you happy, it's to make you stay. The longer you stay, the more they win. But there's another layer. The dopamine trap doesn't just live in your phone. It's in your diet, your shopping habits, even your social life. Food is engineered to be hyper-palatable, loaded with sugar and fat, tricking your brain into craving more. Online shopping promises excitement with every purchase, but the joy fades as soon as the package arrives. Even our social interactions are filtered through screens, instant messages and emojis replacing real emotional connection. Everywhere you turn, dopamine is being pulled from you little by little, leaving you drained, overstimulated, and unsatisfied. And yet the most dangerous part of this trap is how normal it feels. You tell yourself you're just checking your phone, just relaxing, just staying connected. But what's really happening is subtle conditioning. You're teaching your brain to depend on quick rewards and easy pleasure. You're losing touch with the slower, deeper forms of satisfaction. effort, mastery, intimacy, silence. Escaping the dopamine trap doesn't mean rejecting technology or pleasure. It means reclaiming control. It means learning to pause before reacting, to choose depth over distraction, to find reward in discipline rather than indulgence. It's about creating space for boredom, because boredom is the gateway to creativity and clarity. When you stop feeding the constant need for stimulation, something powerful happens. Your brain begins to reset. The noise quiets down. The rush fades. You start to notice real joy again. Not the artificial kind that fades in seconds, but the kind that lasts because it's earned. The modern world may be a dopamine trap, but you hold the key. The moment you decide to stop chasing and start living with awareness, you begin to free yourself from it. The more you indulge, the less you feel. It sounds like a paradox, but it's one of the deepest truths about how the human brain works. At first, pleasure feels like the answer to everything. A quick way to lift your mood, to escape stress, to fill the empty spaces inside you. But over time, the very thing that once gave you joy begins to lose its magic. What used to excite you now barely moves you. The high gets shorter, the crash gets longer, and before you know it, you were stuck in a cycle of chasing pleasure but never truly feeling it. This happens because your brain is always seeking balance. Whenever you experience pleasure through food, social media, shopping, or any source of reward, your brain releases dopamine. It's that surge that makes you feel alive, motivated, and rewarded. But the brain doesn't like to stay out of balance for long. So, in response to a flood of dopamine, it pushes back by reducing your sensitivity to it. It lowers dopamine receptor activity, trying to restore equilibrium. The result? You start needing more of the same stimulus just to achieve the same level of pleasure. That's why one piece of chocolate turns into 5, one episode turns into a binge, and one scroll turns into an entire lost evening. The tragedy is that this process is invisible. You don't notice it happening. You just feel increasingly restless and unsatisfied. You start blaming yourself for being lazy, unmotivated, or distracted. But what's really happening is neurological. The more you indulge in quick, artificial pleasures, the more numb your brain becomes to natural ones. You begin to lose the ability to find joy in simple things, a quiet walk, a conversation, a moment of stillness. Life starts to flatten. The colors fade, the excitement dulls, and everything that once felt special begins to feel ordinary. This is why addiction, in any form, is so devastating. It's not just about overuse, it's about what overuse takes away. It steals your ability to feel. Whether it's substances, social media, or success, the constant pursuit of pleasure rewires your brain to expect intensity all the time. When intensity becomes your baseline, normal life feels unbearable. And so, you reach again for the thing that gave you relief, unaware that it's the very act of reaching that deepens your suffering. The modern world fuels this loop. Everywhere you turn, there's something designed to trigger dopamine, instant entertainment, constant connection, endless novelty. We are drowning in options for pleasure, yet starving for fulfillment. People wonder why they feel anxious, unfocused, or emotionally flat, but the answer is simple. We are overstimulated. The brain wasn't built to handle this much reward. What was once rare and special has become routine, and in that routine, meaning gets lost. But the good news is your brain can recover. When you begin to reduce indulgence, when you stop feeding the constant need for stimulation, the dopamine balance starts to restore itself. At first, it feels uncomfortable. You'll feel bored, restless, even irritable. That's the pain of withdrawal, the brain's way of recalibrating. But if you endure that discomfort long enough, something incredible happens. The fog starts to lift, colors return, you begin to feel real pleasure again, not the synthetic spike of instant gratification, but the grounded satisfaction of being present. Pleasure isn't the enemy, excess is. When you indulge too often, you lose the very sensitivity that makes pleasure meaningful. It's like listening to music too loudly. Eventually, you can't hear the notes anymore. But when you pull back, when you allow silence, the smallest sounds become beautiful again. That's how your brain works. It's designed for contrast, for the rise and fall, the tension and release. Without moments of pain, you can't truly feel pleasure. Without space between rewards, joy loses its impact. So, if you find yourself numb, chasing highs that don't hit like they used to, remember this. Your brain isn't broken, it's simply protecting you. You don't need more stimulation, you need less. You need to let your system reset, to let pleasure find its place again. Because the less you indulge, the more you'll feel. And when you start feeling deeply again, that's when life begins to taste real. Pain is the path to real pleasure. It's a truth that feels uncomfortable in a world built around comfort. We've been taught to avoid pain at all costs, to soothe every discomfort, to distract from every uneasy feeling, to find relief instantly. But what if the very act of escaping pain is what keeps us from feeling true joy? The brain is wired to seek balance between pleasure and pain, like two sides of the same scale. Every time we experience pleasure, the brain tilts toward one side. To restore balance, it pushes back with pain, and the opposite is also true. When we experience pain, the brain compensates with pleasure. This is the secret that few understand. Pain can actually lead to deeper, more lasting happiness. When you face discomfort willingly, when you delay gratification, when you work hard, when you sit with boredom instead of running from it, your brain rewards you. It releases dopamine in a slow, steady, and sustainable way. It's not the intense spike you get from indulgence, but it lasts longer and feels more satisfying. The kind of pleasure that follows effort carries a sense of pride, meaning, and fulfillment. It's the difference between scrolling for distraction and finishing a workout, between buying something new and building something yourself, between escaping life and engaging with it. In contrast, when you chase pleasure without effort, you get the opposite effect. The dopamine spike comes fast and fades fast, leaving behind a crash that feels like pain. The brain adapts quickly, expecting more stimulation to feel normal. You start to crave constant relief from the discomfort that indulgence creates. It's a vicious cycle. The more you try to avoid pain, the more it grows. That's why people often feel anxious, restless, or empty, even when their lives are full of comforts. The problem isn't the presence of pain, it's the absence of resilience. Voluntary discomfort, choosing small, controlled doses of pain, is one of the most powerful ways to reset this balance. Exercise, fasting, cold showers, hard work, discipline, or simply saying no to an impulse. All of these teach your brain that it can survive discomfort. Over time, that resilience strengthens your ability to feel pleasure in healthy, natural ways. You stop needing constant stimulation. You start appreciating simplicity. That cup of coffee tastes better when you've earned it. Rest feels more rewarding after hard work. Joy becomes richer because you've experienced contrast. Pain also builds presence. When you face it instead of escaping, you become more aware of your body, your emotions, your mind. You stop numbing yourself and start listening. Pain is information. It tells you where to grow, what to change, what matters. When you numb that signal with constant pleasure, you lose connection to yourself. You drift through life reacting instead of responding, consuming instead of creating. But when you embrace discomfort, you reclaim your power. You stop running and start living with intention. This doesn't mean seeking suffering for its own sake. It means respecting pain as a teacher, not an enemy. When you lift a weight, your muscles break down so they can rebuild stronger. The same principle applies to your mind and emotions. Growth requires strain. Meaning requires effort. True joy is born from contrast, from the satisfaction of overcoming, not the ease of avoidance. Every time you choose to do something hard, to face the craving instead of feeding it, to stay in the moment instead of escaping, your brain rewires itself. The dopamine that once demanded instant gratification becomes calmer, more stable, more aligned with purpose. And that's when pleasure transforms from a fleeting rush into a grounded state of peace. Pain is not the opposite of pleasure, it's the doorway to it. The sweetest joy comes not from comfort, but from conquering challenge. In a world that promises endless ease, the real power lies in choosing what's hard. Because on the other side of that pain is something no quick dopamine hit can give you. Strength, clarity, gratitude, and the deep, steady pleasure of being truly alive. Detox your brain, rebuild your sensitivity. That is where real healing begins. When you've spent years chasing constant stimulation, notifications, sugar, screens, validation, your brain becomes numb to life's natural rewards. The highs stop feeling high, and the lows start feeling unbearable. You find yourself trapped between craving more and feeling less. But the good news is that your brain is not broken. It's adaptable. It can recover. It can relearn how to feel joy again, but only if you give it the chance to rest, to reset, and to detox from the flood of artificial dopamine that's been running the show. A dopamine detox isn't about punishment or deprivation. It's about restoration. It means stepping away from the things that hijack your brain's reward system long enough for it to find balance again. When you stop flooding your system with constant stimulation, your brain begins to heal itself. It starts producing dopamine naturally and rediscovering sensitivity to small pleasures. But this process isn't easy. In the beginning, it feels like withdrawal, boredom, frustration, emptiness. That's because your brain has been conditioned to expect a steady stream of instant rewards. When those rewards disappear, it panics. It sends you cravings, trying to lure you back. But if you can sit through that discomfort, if you can resist the urge to reach for the next hit, your brain will slowly begin to rewire. At first, the silence feels unbearable. You pick up your phone and realize there's nothing to check. You sit in a room without background noise and feel restless. Your mind races, searching for something to fill the space. But what you're really experiencing is your nervous system recalibrating. This is the detox in action. It's your brain learning to operate without the constant drip of dopamine that modern life provides. It's uncomfortable, but it's necessary, because beneath the restlessness lies freedom. As days go by, you begin to notice subtle changes. The fog starts to clear, your concentration improves, sleep deepens, conversations feel richer. You start to find small things beautiful again. The sound of rain, the smell of coffee, the warmth of sunlight. These moments had always been there, but your brain was too overstimulated to register them. When dopamine levels stabilize, these experiences feel new, vibrant, and deeply satisfying. The world starts to regain color. Detoxing your brain doesn't mean giving up pleasure forever. It means giving pleasure its rightful place. It's about balance, allowing enough space between highs so that they feel meaningful again. It's the difference between listening to music all day until it becomes noise, or listening once and feeling every note. Life becomes richer when you allow contrast, when joy isn't constant but earned. The most powerful part of this process is how it changes your relationship with desire. Instead of being a slave to cravings, you become their observer. You begin to notice the urge without obeying it. You realize you have control. That realization alone rewires your brain, because each time you resist an impulse, you strengthen your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for self-control and decision-making. Over time, this builds confidence, resilience, and emotional stability. You no longer need the constant rush to feel alive. You start to feel alive by simply being present. When your brain detoxes from overstimulation, it also opens the door to deeper emotions: sadness, gratitude, awe, love. You begin to experience the full spectrum of feeling again. This sensitivity is not weakness, it's your humanity returning. When you numb pain, you also numb joy. When you allow yourself to feel both, you reconnect with life in its raw, beautiful form. So detox your brain, not to escape the world, but to rediscover it. Step back from the noise long enough to hear your own thoughts. Take breaks from screens, from sugar, from excess. Let your mind breathe. It may feel uncomfortable at first, but that discomfort is the sound of healing. When you rebuild your sensitivity, you reclaim your happiness. You stop needing to chase pleasure, because now it finds you in every simple, honest, and real moment. The ultimate freedom is mastering your desires. Most people believe freedom means doing whatever you want, whenever you want. But that kind of freedom is an illusion. It feels good at first. The power to choose pleasure, to chase excitement, to give in to every impulse. Yet over time, it turns into a cage. Because when your desires control you, you're not free at all. You're enslaved by your cravings. Real freedom begins when you no longer need the constant hit, when your peace doesn't depend on getting what you want, but on mastering the wanting itself. Every desire begins with dopamine, that tiny spark that says, "Hey, go," after ITT. It's not evil, it's what drives us to create, explore, and grow. But in a world of infinite access, dopamine has turned from a guide into a trap. There's always something new to crave: Another message, another purchase, another thrill. Each one promises satisfaction, but delivers emptiness once the moment passes. And the more you feed desire, the stronger it grows. It's like watering a weed, it only spreads. The secret to inner peace isn't satisfying every craving. It's realizing you don't have to act on them. When you start observing your desires instead of obeying them, something powerful happens. You begin to separate yourself from your impulses. You realize that the craving is just a sensation, a wave that rises and falls if you let it. You don't have to fight it, and you don't have to follow it. You just have to watch it pass. This is what mastery feels like. Calm awareness in the face of temptation. You still feel desire, but it no longer dictates your behavior. You become the one choosing, not the one reacting. This kind of discipline doesn't make life dull, it makes it meaningful. When you stop chasing instant gratification, you make room for purpose. The joy that comes from self-control is quieter, but infinitely more powerful. It's the feeling of walking away from something that once ruled you, of knowing that you're no longer at the mercy of your impulses. That confidence is the real dopamine, not the artificial spike, but the deep satisfaction of self-mastery. Mastering desire also changes the way you experience pleasure. When you no longer need constant stimulation, every simple joy becomes amplified. A conversation feels deeper, music sounds richer, nature feels more alive. That's because pleasure only feels strong in contrast to restraint. If you taste sweetness all day, it stops tasting sweet. But if you fast for a while, even a small bite feels incredible. The same applies to life. When you create space between indulgences, your appreciation returns. But mastery doesn't come easily. It requires awareness, patience, and the willingness to be uncomfortable. Every time you resist the pull of temptation, whether it's to scroll, to buy, to eat, to escape, you strengthen your mind. Each small act of restraint builds mental muscle, just like training the body. You learn to sit with discomfort, to breathe through the craving, to remind yourself that you are not your impulses. This practice, repeated over time, transforms your entire sense of self. The irony is that when you stop needing more, you actually gain everything. You start to experience a deeper, steadier happiness that no one can take from you. You stop living in reaction and start living with intention. You can enjoy pleasure without being consumed by it, and face pain without being broken by it. That's balance, the harmony between desire and discipline, between wanting and being. This is what true freedom looks like, not the freedom to indulge endlessly, but the freedom to choose wisely. To want something and decide consciously whether it serves you or not. To feel desire and smile, knowing it no longer owns you. That's when pleasure stops being your master and becomes your ally. That's when happiness stops being a chase and becomes a state of being. Mastering your desires isn't about denying life. It's about reclaiming it. It's the power to walk through the world with clarity, calm, and control. And that is the highest form of pleasure there is. The pleasure of being free.